Thank you for tuning in to Beyond Evidence. We always want to thank Northeast Georgia Business RadioX studio for this podcast. So this episode is called Trials. A lot of people don't know or even understand how a private investigator can help an attorney during a trial or a court appearance. It is a lot of juggling. It's a lot of time consuming. It's very mental, but it starts out with the private investigator having an order from the judge to be able to assist the attorney. So when you're set up for a court hearing or a trial date, the judge doesn't just automatically, or the attorneys allow you or the state to sit at the table with the lawyer. The first thing of business that has to go on would be an order entered from the attorney you're working for. So mind you, you are working directly for the attorney during the trial. So there's a lot of tasks that have to happen, but that order needs to be signed either by verbal or a written order that you are allowed to actually go to the table and sit at the table with the attorney during the whole court case, from opening statements to everything that you need to do as far as serving subpoenas, everything. But the best thing about sitting at the table that taught me the most was when you work so hard, very, very hard, usually 20 hours a day out of 24 hour a day. You work so hard and you're allowed to sit and see how your evidence or your actions or your video or researched really, really helped the attorney and the trial, because that's kind of the dumping ground of everything at the end you're working so hard for. Either a criminal trial or a civil trial or domestic. It could be court-appointed trial, it could be federal, but you get to sit right there at the table and help the attorney. So the first rule of business is to pick a jury. So that action is called voir dire. So when you pick a jury, a lot of times there is a list that is emailed or allowed to be accessed by the attorney about 10 days before trial, and it is a list of potential jurors to sit in the jury box for your trial. So it's a list of about 300 names. If you get that list, you're able to sit and research the background of the juror, where they work, where they live, how long they've been in the county, some of their addresses, and just a background, a deep background based on the voter registry list for the jurors. Now, a lot of times you don't get that list and it's just not accessible. But if you do, it's very, very helpful. And what the private investigator does, or what we have done, is we take that list and we put it in 3 piles. One saying no, one saying yes, and one saying maybe. So you do that and then add a whole spreadsheet. So you're sitting there in front of not 300 potential jurors, but just 30. Because a lot of times some of them don't show up, some of them move out of the county. So the list is usually wheedled down to about 30 people in the room. And as you walk in, you obviously have to be dressed very professional, just like the attorney. I always like to say when people testify or when they're in the jury room, they need to look out in the audience, the judge or the jurors, and not know a difference between you and the attorney. So no loud colors, no loud hair, or just a whole bunch of stuff that could be judged by you. So we always wear suits and dress very appropriate. As you're sitting with the attorney, he has the list. Well, the attorney is asking questions to all of the potential jurors, from what books do you read, what TV program do you watch, how long have you lived in the county, are you military, just any question that they can ask. And so I am writing every single thing down as quick as I can, and also judging, the body language of the juror. Can they not hear? Do they not understand our language? Do they have a sight problem? Are they able to sit in the box for a long time? Are they anxious? Do they not want to be there? Are they overly interested? Are they opinionated? Are they sitting there with their hands over their chest, being very guarded? Are they very talkative? Do you know anybody? Do you know the people in the room? So there's probably, I'd say, 200 questions that's asked through that whole entire process. And as you're sitting with the attorney, it takes a long time. So it's usually from 9 o'clock in the morning till about 5 or 6 in the afternoon. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days, depending on the county and the case. So let's just imagine it's a criminal case for this trial that we're going to talk about. So for a criminal case, you either have your client or defendant is either incarcerated or they're out on bond. If they are out on bond and they go through the trial, you want to make sure that they go nowhere near the jurors or be in the same bathroom with the jurors or nowhere around them. And you have to dress them too. This becomes very interesting because if they are incarcerated, you literally have to. I have literally sat for 2 hours in front of somebody, male or female, and say, okay, what size shoe do you wear? Okay, what size underwear do you wear? What size pants and belts? So it has to be shoes, socks, underwear, pants, belt, shirts, ties, suit, and different shirts underneath. So you have to weigh all that out, go buy all those clothes, and clean those clothes because I didn't always I went to thrift stores and other stores to save some money, the county money, and then clean them, press them, have everything ready and prepared to deliver to the facility that they may be at or deliver to their home. And you always want to make sure they're on time, so I would always pick up the person or the witness and bring them to court. So helping the attorney is almost like a right hand duty that we do as private investigators. So we try to think of everything that the attorney hasn't thought of. For example, besides dressing everybody, calling all of the witnesses. Even if they're subpoenaed, nobody really wants to come to court. So we have to make arrangements that they're picked up because, as y'all know, with Georgia traffic, Atlanta traffic, being at court at 9 o'clock in Carrollton and you're leaving from Auburn, Georgia could take a 3-hour drive. So sometimes we have to get them hotel rooms, the witnesses, family members, so they're local and they could get to the court quickly. But as you are subpoenaing them to come to court, you also have to keep up with them at the courthouse, which can be a task, because you have no idea when they're going to be called. They could be called at 9:05 in the morning or 12:05 in the afternoon. And I can't tell you how many times a witness is called. They're there, but they're not there. You have to go track them down in the courthouse and find them. So we're doing a lot of running and we're doing a lot of patience to help the witnesses and to accommodate the judge. Now, the judge sometimes interjects themselves during some of this process, but while you're picking voir dire, the judge usually takes notes and helps with any accommodation and is very, kind and nice going through the whole process. Now, some attorneys will take their whole case and start asking questions that pertain to the case. So almost laying out the case. Do you feel a certain way about a criminal case? And could you sit here? And what do you think about a domestic violence case? So almost trying to lay out the entire case. Also, what I do is there are requirements to sit on a jury in the state of Georgia. The first requirement is you could not have been convicted of a felony or convicted of a crime of moral turpitude. So that means like a misdemeanor of maybe theft or a felony. Now, that's not just in the state of Georgia. That's also anywhere. So when I run a background for somebody sitting on a jury, I have to make sure that they're not convicted in any other state. And you also have to get certified copies of that conviction and produce it to the judge or produce it to the attorney to see if it's going to be an issue. Because if they sit on the jury and listen to a case through the whole process and they're a convicted felon and nobody finds out, there's a chance for appeals. So your job is to check on that and make sure the backgrounds are correct. Second requirement would be that the juror actually lived in the county that they are sitting for the jury on 2 years prior to the term. I know that sounds odd, but prior to the term, each county has a different term. And you have to understand their term. Gwinnett County, they have month-to-month terms. Other rural counties, sometimes they won't have trials for like 3 months. So where this comes into play is you have military people, you have students, you have people that move out of the area. So you have to calculate the 2 years from the time of the term of the court that they had to live in that county. So that's not really been an issue. Sometimes you will find with students and being 19 and 18 that they swap back and forth to college and the home. So you have to make sure their residency is in that county. And a lot of times this is addressed in the very beginning. So as the jurors are picked, each person has, depends on the jurisdiction, depends on the court case, between 6 to 12 or 13 jurors and then alternates. The alternates are usually between 1 and 4, and they sit there and listen to the whole case. So if one of the jurors gets sick and have to pull off of the jury, they're therefore to be an alternate, but they're not able to vote at the end. So when you sit through a trial and you help the attorney, everything's at stake. You have people's lives at stake. You have family lives at stake. You have businesses. You have everything at stake. So it's physically is okay to sit through a trial, but mentally, I just can't tell you how many times I came home when I first started my business with court-appointed cases, and I would be in the middle of a trial, and I would tell my husband, look, I just need to come home. I don't know what you're going to do with the kids. I'm going straight to bed, because mentally it's so exhausting to have to think about everything that the attorney's trying to do. You have to prepare with notebooks, make sure you have all the evidence from the file, other files, certified copies, and make sure you have 5 sets of them. You have 5 sets of files, because the judge needs to have a set. The plaintiff and defendant, or a domestic case, plaintiff and plaintiff against each other, has to have the file. The clerk needs a file, and there needs to be an original. So every time you're producing something, you're always producing 5 sets of it. You can't have enough copies. Then you have to organize all that for the attorney, because you don't want the attorney looking for 2 or 3 files and everybody's waiting on the attorney and looking at him or her. So I can't tell you how many times we had organizers and files that are correct. You also need to call the clerk of the judge and say, hey, I'm helping John prepare for a trial. I'd like to come in and see your audio and visual, because, we want to show a PowerPoint, or we want to show some videos. And you can't just show up the day of court and understand all of the audio and the visual. And some courthouses have no internet. You have to bring your own internet. So we usually go in a couple of days early and actually bring all the exhibits, the demonstrous exhibits, and everything we're going to produce, and sit down and look at their Wi-Fi and how we can hook it up, because the attorney wants to just come right in, have the laptop, have the materials, turn on a button, and everything work. I can't tell you how many times being in a rural county to hit that button and nothing works, from the projector to the Wi-Fi to the pictures that you're going to present. So you don't want the attorney to have to worry about that. Then once you start your voir dire and you pick the juror, you start with opening statements. Opening statements is really unique because you get to understand the case in the beginning. So usually the state and a criminal case goes first, and then we go second, and they're able to go last too. So you're vigorously taking notes while you're sitting at the table to look at the jurors and see how they're reacting to what the attorney's saying, because he or she is just concentrating on the opening statements. Opening statements can get pretty heated too. You also have to make sure that any family members or any other witnesses that is either inside the courtroom or outside the courtroom are not being upset, showing emotion, doing anything that's going to take away from what the jury is trying to listen to, or the judge. Because there's been several times that phones have gone off, pagers a long time ago, or somebody's just upset and they are excused from the courtroom. And you don't really know what the jury is thinking the entire time. So it's really important for body language to sit down and understand how they're thinking. Are they paying attention? Are they not? Because some of these points do become appealable if all of a sudden you have a sleeping jury, or you have a sleeping judge, or you have some issues while you're going through the trial during opening statements. Opening statements are always kind of interesting too, because it's like putting out the whole plan of what they're going to present in the case. So you really get to learn things in the first hour or two. Now, the benches that they sit in per each courtroom, because we have a lot of courtrooms, probably over 155 courtrooms plus in the state of Georgia, it's not real comfortable sometimes. You have to take a lot of breaks. Some of the jurors will ask for breaks. So it becomes very uncomfortable sometimes as the days go by and the weeks go by. Also, the private investigator helps the attorney out with subpoenas. Subpoenas are served to personally. That's the number one thing. It has to be served personally. If we are subpoenaing witnesses and subpoenaing records and evidence to the court trial, we have to make sure it's always personal. I always record it when I do it. If it's a civil case, we have to give them a witness fee from their travel time, from the time of their house to the courthouse. Or if it's a criminal case, they get no witness fee. But we have to serve them, and then we have to file an affidavit of service that's a sworn statement that we served them 5 hours before court, and that affidavit has to be filed. file. I recall sometimes the biggest people that just really didn't want to come to court sometime and thought it was just an issue was pharmacies. I can't tell you how many times I would serve a pharmacist that would have to come to either criminal trial or civil trial and serve them for their records, and they would just look at me like, I don't know what makes you think that I'm going to be inconvenienced to come to court. So my job sometimes is to tell the judge that it was served, and if they don't show up, to call the pharmacist and explain to the pharmacist, if you probably do not come to court, the judge is going to send the sheriff's deputy out to come get you to come to court, and then you may have to sit here for a long time. A lot of times that happened. You know, the judges are accommodative, but it's just to the point sometimes where people just don't think they need to come. So the reason why I love to sit through the trials too is every case is different. Every case you can learn from. They're never the same. And it's just always exciting. And that's just the most interesting thing that you can do as a private investigator, is to see how your evidence is used or not used. Was it entered in the case? Was it entered in a timely fashion? Is it going to be argued? Is it going to be submitted in the case? Is it going to be ruled to be disqualified? And then also we have to prepare our private investigators too to testify. And you're not allowed to talk about the case to other witnesses. And a lot of times they can get caught doing that because there's cameras inside and outside of just about every courtroom. So sometimes that's become an issue when the jurors are eating, lunch in the same cafeteria. The sheriff's deputies are pretty good about trying to separate everybody during a trial. Trials usually go on for about a week to a week and a half. They usually wrap up after about a week and a half. If it goes on longer, there's usually an issue or a problem. The other things that we help out attorneys is with their big, huge exhibits, and they're called demonstrative exhibits. So if there's a photograph or a video that needs to be blown up to show to the jury, it was our job to usually go to Kinko's or a local shop and make sure that everything was in order and it was labeled and it was prepared for the attorney and in color. So about, 5 or 10 years ago, I used to go to Kinko's, and I used to spend a lot of time there making copies and all these exhibits. So I ended up buying the most biggest printer that you could for the firm because I spent so much time at Kinko's. That being said, that was 10, 15 years ago. Now everything has been reduced to a jump drive, that you can literally produce everything on a jump drive and put it into the computer for everybody to hear, and then actually take the jump drive and enter it in the court case as an original. And we used to use these big old cameras a long time ago to film things and for our cases. And now we just use our phone, and we're able to take the data out of the phone and transfer it to any evidence that we need. It's very challenging because we have a lot of data that we need. Some of the tools that the private investigators use to be able to access quickly for the courtroom to see is like a data bank of like track ops. We use track ops, so you're able to just log in and you're able to just see the evidence right there and play it in front of the jury. So this really helps because it's at a data bank that can be accessed right there pretty quickly. I would like to finish up with the trials to say that after evidence is produced and after the judge goes over the case, everything has been done for a week and a half, the jurors go back and they pick a foreman. Foreman means that person is the one that will read guilty or not, or what they have decided. So when they go back and they're in their room and the door is shut, they pick a foreman. It's always interesting who becomes the foreman because the attorneys and everybody in the courtroom usually say, okay, I think I can bet who's going to be the foreman. So it's always a challenge to find out who that is. And it's usually somebody that's either sat on a jury before, interested in the law, pays attention, takes a lot of notes, but they do pick a foreman. That foreman also signs the outcome of the case when they're done. I would like to finish with talking about how I transferred from being a process server to a private investigator. I wouldn't say it was luck, but I knew I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I had no idea that I was going to have a private investigation company. So as my process serving company was becoming a pretty large company and I was serving a lot of subpoenas, I guess one day I sat somebody's driveway too long and I really upset a judge. It was really, really scary. So I served the person and I had to go to court and testify. And Judge Clark, God bless his soul, he became one of my very best friends and he's passed passed away. Such a great judge. We literally had a court case where I had to testify in front of the judge and explain to him what I did and why I sat on the property so long. And I'll never forget, Judge Clark looked at me and said, at the time it was Miss Standridge, it was quite a long time ago, probably 1997, said, Miss Standridge, what makes you think that you can sit there on somebody's property and not have a private investigation license to do so? I was petrified. Unfortunately, I started crying and I was like, Your Honor, I'm very sorry. He says, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with you today. And I looked at the deputy that I knew, and the deputy looked at me, and he just put his finger over his mouth, and he said, just be quiet, Robin, just be quiet. And I just sat there, and Judge Clark looked at me, and he says, you know what? I think I might put you in jail today. I'd never seen jail, except for on the other side. And I apologized profusely. And he says, you know what? I'm going to let you sit on the stand. I'm going to go back in my chambers, and I'm going to make a decision what to do with you today. I was beyond scared. He was dead serious, and I was so scared. And I knew this deputy, and the deputy said, I'm going to go talk to him for you. And I was so grateful. He came back an hour later. I'm still sitting in the box. And he looked at me. He says, do you want to do more in life besides just be a process server? I said, well, sir, I probably do, but what you have in mind? At this moment, I was just like a blithering mess. I'm like, okay, whatever you need me to do, we're going to do. I do not want to go to the Gwinnett County Jail. He says, I have an order here that you are to go and complete a private investigation course, pay for it yourself, and be back here within 6 to 8 months, have your PI license, and I will dismiss what anything else could be done in this case for you. And I was so alleviated, had no idea what I was going to do. Was a single parent at the time, and I'm like, okay. So I'm going home to living at home with my mom. I said, Mom, you wouldn't believe what I have to do. She says, what do you mean? She says, I have to go to school. And he says, well, what did you do? So I literally it was like $600, $900 for this school that I'll never forget, trying to do pennies and dollars to get gas money to go to Gwinnett Tech on Tuesday and Thursday from 6 to 8 to get your license. I was so proud when I did do it, and it did help my business, that I literally went back to Judge Clark. I framed my PI license. He had it hanging on his wall for a while. I just will never forget how much he scared me. And we became very close friends. I adored everything that he did. He was very well educated. If I needed some advice on something when he was off the bench, he really helped out. He was just a really good guy. You know, I really learned a really big lesson, and it had molded me of what I am today. I was very excited that I did get my PI license. That leads up to the end of this episode, but I do want to express that our next episode is going to be about taxes and how the first 2 years of my business, I could not believe what happened to me with taxes in the state of Georgia. Please contact us by our website, martinelliinvestigations.com. Martinelli ends in an I. Investigation starts with an I, so that's 2 I's with an S on the end. Our email is MII, and then Georgia spelled out, GeorgiaPI@gmail.com. And please call us anytime at 770-337-3999, 770-337-3999 for a free consultation. Thanks so much, and have a great peachy day.